Definitely things are going down as expected on the world stage, as I've covered many times over the years with Carol Rosin, former aerospace executive with Fairchild Industries, and her connection with Wernher von Braun. I'll play that video clip in a little bit, but first off, let's get right to it with this latest news with this rocket being launched to supposedly intercept this asteroid. This is just a test, but this is foretelling their plans of the future. Definitely this will come into play at a later point. I'll get right to the video and let's take a listen.
Probably not a fate many of us want to think about, but have you ever wondered what would happen if an asteroid headed towards Earth? 66 million years ago, the dinosaurs confronted that very scenario, and of course it didn't end well. Now that NASA wants to test a so-called planetary defense system to prevent humanity going the same way, it's launching a spacecraft directly at an asteroid to see if it can be pushed off course.
This is the first time SpaceX has taken a NASA spacecraft and intentionally launched it on a trajectory to escape Earth and crash into an asteroid. So, again, pretty cool mission.
And with that goofy look on her face and the very interesting name as well with She-Man, they love the plan names as always, just like the first woman for NASA supposedly in space named Sally Ride. The plan names has always been prevalent with all these news stories. But getting back to this again, this newsman here mentioning the number 66 and the supposed $33 million asteroid redirector, the DART program. I mean, obviously it's always by the numbers, and these are the Masonic numbers, of course, as you can see with the Masonic number 33. And simultaneously, as this is happening with the supposed DART project, you have this in the headlines. Of course, this has been rampant on the headlines over the last year, even further back, but definitely it's been picking up steam with the Pentagon forming a group to examine unexplained aerial sightings, basically the whole UFO angle, which we'll get into right now. Again with Carol Rosin. Just take a listen. And again, this is classic predictive programming. This is meant to be released, letting the public know what's going to happen before it happens. Take a listen.
When I was a corporate manager of Fairchild Industries in 1974 through 77, I met the late Dr. Wernher von Braun in early 74. At that time, von Braun was dying of cancer. But he assured me that he would live a few more years in order to tell me about the game that was being played. Asteroids. Now at this point, he kind of chuckled the first time he said it. Asteroids. Against asteroids, we're going to build space-based weapons. So it was funny then. And the funniest one of all was against what he called aliens, extraterrestrials. That would be the final card. And over and over and over during the 4 years that I knew him and was giving his speeches for him, he would bring up that last card. And remember, Carol, the last card is the alien card. We're going to have to build space-based weapons against aliens, and all of it, he said, is a lie.
And you just heard again Carol Rosin saying it's all a lie, basically relaying the message once again from Wernher von Braun. And this is exactly how they do it. And that gets into what you see here with Wernher von Braun in his tombstone, where it has the Bible verse, Psalms 19:1, where the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. Very interesting for a man that's head of rocketry when it comes to NASA basically from the inception. But again, for those that understand the whole concept of the firmament, this is the biblical cosmology here. As you can see, the firmament is the structure above the atmosphere, conceived as a vast solid dome, the biblical cosmology. Just like as you see here with the domed earth. And that's probably a better term than saying flat earth, because there's definitely peaks and valleys. But definitely there is a structure above us. This is why we have this pressurized system. And I find it very interesting, the concepts from NASA, just like the space shuttle called Atlantis, like we are within Atlantis. And this is, again, biblical, with all these Bible verses, as you can see here, pointing in that direction. If you're a Bible believer, the waters above, the waters below, the ends of the earth mentioned 50 times. Earth is immovable, mentioned several times, as you can see here. The sun, moon, and stars under the firmament, not outside, within the firmament. So people might say this is just a depiction, but this depiction matches our observed reality. As you can see here, the daytime moon, supposedly 238,000 miles in deep space. And again, you see it clearly with the blue sky in the back. This matches the biblical flat earth, where it states in the Bible, Genesis, in the very beginning, and God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. Planets are not mentioned. Planets are basically just wandering stars, again, within the firmament. And it also clearly states, and God set them in the firmament. So they're within the firmament. They're not outside projecting in. So I want to be very clear about this. So again, this matches our observed reality. So what the Bible says and what we observe go hand in hand clearly, as you see this aeroplane in the moon in the daytime sky. And that brings us to the sun. Clearly not 92 million miles away in deep space, in the vacuum, supposed vacuum of deep space. Clearly very, very close. This local sun. It's obvious for those that have eyes to see and that are not blinded by science. And that gets back to our enclosed system. And that gets into NASA once again with the Atlantis space shuttle, which in my estimation is, of course, truth in plain sight, living in this enclosed system. And you have this one shot from NASA itself of a space shuttle launch doing its arc. And of course, not going straight up. I understand what people are going to say that believe in the lies of science, that this is a low Earth orbit transition into so-called deep space, when literally nothing can breach God's firmament. And that gets back to these so-called launches by NASA and SpaceX. Again, getting back to these arcs, as you see, with these launches. And of course, the bad stigma of the Bermuda Triangle itself. And this is where I believe they end up, in this region here, in the Bermuda Triangle. Just another image of the same. So again, this is perfectly placed with all the launches that go off the coast of Florida. Again, it all adds up, all makes sense. Now getting back to this so-called space shuttle, Atlantis, just take a look here at this, again, space shuttle, and look at these very small wings. You really believe, according to NASA, that these space shuttles go into space and come back with these little dinky wings and act as a glider? Absolutely not. These are airplanes disguised as space shuttles, 100%. And one thing I found interesting as well, with the whole Atlantis and other space shuttles, this one in particular, this one had exactly 33 missions. And of course, runway number 33 at the Kennedy Space Center. Give me a break. Again, this is all about Freemasonry. And that gets into going into the past, getting back on topic with the whole UFO angle that's being pushed on the world stage, going back to 1947 in Roswell, and the actual site on the third parallel where this supposed event took place. We'll get more into Roswell, but first off, just more Masonic connections with the number 33 and signs and symbols. And here you have the Phoenix Lights, which is basically a chevron in plain sight, chevron being 33. And also it's shaped, as you see here, as the Masonic square. And you combine the two, of course, the compass and the square itself. So they have their Masonic fingerprints all over the place. And of course, the Phoenix itself in Freemasonry and also being, of course, on the 33rd parallel, just like Roswell. Just like you see here with Area 51 and Robert Lazar in the Illuminati card game from 1995, doing the Masonic hand sign. And that again gets back the whole so-called Roswell incident with a video clip I'll play from the 1980s, this one TV show called Unsolved Mysteries. Now let's take a look at this portion from Unsolved Mysteries regarding the Roswell incident.
He found the debris field spread out near his ranch house.
It was obvious that something had crashed in one of his pastures the night before. Whatever it was broken up beyond identification.
The debris field was approximately 3/4 of a mile long, maybe as much as 200 or 300 feet in width. Scattered along there were bits and pieces of material. We refuse to call it metal because from the descriptions we have, it was more of a plastic-like material, very strong, very lightweight. The pieces of it were described as being 3 or 4 feet long, but as light as a feather, as thin as newsprint. There were metal beams that were slightly flexible but very strong, and it was spread out all over the field.
Some of the metal pieces appear to have strange qualities and unusual tensile properties. Later that day, Mac drove over to his closest neighbors, Floyd and Loretta Proctor, who lived 10 miles away.
Afternoon, Floyd. Loretta.
Hi, Mac. What brings you all the way out here? For Mac, he was excited. You know, he was wanting somebody to go down and check it out. And we should have went. But we didn't.
Take a look at that. Light a match to it. You'll see what I'm talking about.
And he brought a little sliver of wood-looking stuff, and him and my husband tried to cut it and burn it, but it wouldn't whittle and it wouldn't burn.
Well, I'll admit that's pretty damn odd.
Now I would say it looked like plastic, but back then, why, you know, we didn't have plastic, and I guess it was more like some kind of a lightweight wood.
The Proctors urged Brazel to go to the authorities. The following Monday, Brazel reported his discovery to the sheriff, who informed nearby Roswell Army Air Base. That afternoon, Mac Brazel led 2 Army intelligence officers to the crash site. One of the officers was Major Jesse Marcel Sr., an experienced combat pilot, whose primary duty in peacetime was to investigate air accidents.
Why don't you stay there, Mr. Brazel? Lieutenant?
Even with his experience, Marcel was unable to identify what kind of craft it was. Marcel died in 1982, but before his death, he gave the following interview for a documentary film about UFOs.
They were just fragments strewn all over the area, an area about 3/4 of a mile long and several hundred feet wide. So we proceeded to pick up the parts. He says, I tried to bend this stuff. He says, it will not bend. I even tried to burn that. It would not burn. He says, that stuff weighs nothing. It's not any thicker than tinfoil in the pack of cigarettes. He says, we even tried making a dent in it with a 16-pound sledgehammer.
And this makes absolutely no sense. Their story here is complete nonsense, where you have a supposed UFO with all these pieces strewn all over the place from the initial impact, but they can't cut through it. They can't burn it. Supposedly indestructible, But again, parts all over the place. This is a huge, huge contradiction once again. And people that watched this documentary years ago, they got to use critical thinking skills and put these pieces together, no pun intended, to understand what is taking place, where this story makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. And let's continue on.
Still no dead in it. One thing I was certain of, being familiar with all our activities, that it was not a weather balloon, nor an aircraft, nor a missile. It was something else of which we didn't know what it was.
Late on the night of July 7th, Major Marcel drove back to Roswell, his car loaded down with the unusual remains found on the ranch. Before going on to the base, he stopped by his home. He wanted to show his family what he had found.
When he came back to the house, he had a bunch of wreckage with him at the time, and he brought the wreckage into the house, actually waking my mother and myself out so we could view this because it's so unusual. This was about 2 o'clock in the morning, as I recall, right? And he spread it out so we could get some basic idea of what it looked like, what it was.
Jesse Marcel Jr. was 11 years old at the time and remembers the incident vividly.
Where'd you find all this stuff?
He is one of the few people still alive known to have handled pieces of the debris.
No, son, I don't know what this stuff is.
We were amazed by this debris that was there. Probably because we didn't know what it was, just the unknown.
Look at this writing. What do you think that is?
The most remarkable fragment was a short piece of I-beam, which was covered with strange symbols and embossed markings.
Looks like some kind of hieroglyphics.
And that gets into what you see here with the more recent, going back to last year with Elon Musk. And when it comes to the Egyptian pyramids, where Elon Musk stated on Twitter that aliens built the pyramids. And this is definitely a subconscious seed being planted, that we're being visited. The Roswell incident where you had the hieroglyphics supposedly on the parts. The Egyptian pyramids, of course, the hieroglyphics. And basically started from so-called ancient aliens. So definitely they're planting a seed of the mind once again with these visitors from so-called other worlds, going way back in time. And this is part of removing God from the equation. And another very interesting aspect when it comes to Elon Musk and the connection with von Braun in this 1952 book by Wernher von Braun himself called Project Mars, where he saw that a man would lead this colony to Mars, and it was a man called Elon. So what are the chances of that? Unbelievable. And of course, in 1952, NASA, the so-called space agency for the U.S., did not exist. Basically, NASA started in 1958, and with all the so-called missions to Mars, as you see here, being led by SpaceX and Project Mars, it's definitely obvious this is all planned years ago, many years ago, as we can see, with, again, Wernher von Braun planting the seed with Project Mars, led by a man by the name of Elon on the world stage. So definitely, the world is a stage, and these events are made to happen, just like I showed in the very beginning of this video presentation, with Carol Rosen telling us through Wernher von Braun what's going to happen before it happens, and it's obvious to see that the world's a stage.
Was against what he called aliens, extraterrestrials. That would be the final card. And over and over and over during the 4 years that I knew him and was giving his speeches for him, he would bring up that last card. And remember, Carol, the last card is the alien card. We're going to have to build space-based weapons against aliens, and all of it, he said, is a lie.
And definitely another character on the world stage was Stanton Friedman. Very well known, very famous for pushing the whole idea of aliens, UFOs, this whole idea of deep space. And of course, you have the globe propaganda. You have the bookshelf in the back with full of books. And this supposedly equates someone that's credible, they're intelligent, someone you should listen to. Again, this whole photo is nothing but propaganda. Again, a person definitely embedded with the government, and that gets into what is happening today with this book by Stanton Friedman, and I'll just call it Crash at the Crown. And again, this is the propaganda being pushed today, and it matches up with the whole Masonic logo with the 33, and there is the crown, which is basically identical to, again, what is presented here. Okay, and here's just more of the same with Stanton Friedman and more covers. This has been re-released over the years. And again, the same title, just different cover. And again, the whole Masonic concept of the crown and Roswell. Definitely in plain sight. And of course, the crown, I'll call it, is 33 in gematria. And another aspect of the crown in this city just south of Los Angeles, as you can see, the Crown, California. And this is from History Channel. Just take a quick look. As you can see, this individual talking about UFOs in the Crown, California location. And they show the map here. And one thing I want to point out is this individual talking about it. And just back up. I'm going to get a little bit of a close-up. And you see the devil. And you see the number 33. The end of course, 533. You get your 33. And it just so happens in numerology, the devil is 33. So just like Bob Lazar and Stanton Friedman, no different with this individual. Definitely part of the world stage, part of the propaganda being pushed by the mainstream media and those that control every aspect of television programming. Ronald Reagan, former president back in the 80s. Let's take a listen to what it said here. Definitely an actor in the world stage, like all presidents, part of this grand deception. Let's take a listen to what it said here.
Perhaps we need some outside universal threat to make us recognize this common bound. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
And before even moving forward, this propaganda being pushed again, this idea of aliens from other worlds. I should mention, you see here above Reagan, you see here the UN logo, which is the flat earth model, which many know about the flat earth truth. Literally, they are identical. And also, there are 33 segments in the UN logo. And I should mention as well the laurel wreath that surrounds the flat earth model. This represents victory. The laurel wreath once again. And I find it very interesting what it said, again, when it comes to Ronald Reagan. And literally, 20, 30 years later, you have Bill Clinton appear on a late night talk show, literally verbatim, the propaganda that Reagan was pushing is being pushed again. Literally the same words are being spoken at a certain aspect during this late night show. And take a listen to what Bill Clinton says here. The same propaganda definitely being pushed on the masses. And also Bill Clinton, of course, being a Democrat. You have Ronald Reagan, of course, being a Republican. They're pushing the same agenda. They're both on the same side, the same team. It's very clear what's happening here, where there's no left or right, and you have only this one entity, and it's like a two-headed snake all working together, part of the grand deception once again. Let's take a listen once again to Bill Clinton during this late night show.
When the Roswell thing came up, I knew we'd get, gazillions of letters. So I had all the Roswell papers reviewed, everything.
If you saw that there were aliens there, would you tell us?
Yeah.
You would?
I would. Well, I think, look, what do we know? We know now we live in an ever-expanding universe. We know that there are billions of stars and planets literally out there, and the universe is getting bigger. We know from our fancy telescopes that just in the last 2 years, more than 20 planets have been identified outside our solar system that seem to be far enough away from their suns and dense enough that they might be able to support some form of life. So it makes it increasingly less likely that we're alone.
Oh, you're trying to give me a hint that there are aliens.
No, I'm trying to tell you I don't know.
Oh.
But if we were visited someday, I wouldn't be surprised. I just hope that it's not like Independence Day.
Yeah, right.
That it's a conflict.
Well, now we have friendly
Maybe the only way to unite this incredibly divided world of ours.
And that gets to George Bush, another Republican just like Ronald Reagan, pushing the same agenda on late night TV. And this is another aspect I need to point out. Not only do they push propaganda on the news networks, they also push it obviously in late night TV. All of TV, every aspect of television is programming. And the best way to push the propaganda is through entertainment. It sinks into the subconscious, and the public does not realize what is happening. Let's get right to this clip with, again, George Bush speaking on UFO aliens. Let's take a listen.
I think it's very important to me and very important to the country. When you were in office, and I don't know when this happened or if it happened, did you go through the secret files, the UFO documents? Because if I was president, that'd be the first thing I did.
You know, it's funny. My daughters asked the very same question.
They did?
Yeah.
Would you be allowed to tell your daughters what was in those files?
No.
You would not?
No.
Now that you're out of office, you can do anything you want, right?
True, yeah. But I'm not telling you.
And again, this whole idea of UFOs being pushed, aliens being pushed, and that gets us back to the very start of this presentation when it comes to Donald Trump being interviewed by his own son, Donald Jr., regarding Roswell. Let's take a listen to what is said here. And again, want to point out, I'm pointing out the obvious. All these presidents are talking about so-called aliens, UFOs. This agenda is very clear, very transparent. Let's get right to the clip.
Before you leave office, will you let us know if there's aliens? Because this is the only thing I really want to know. I want to know what's going on. Would you ever open up Roswell and let us know what's really going on there?
So many people ask me that question.
I know, it sounds almost ridiculous, but it's actually the real question I want to know.
It sounds like a cute question, but it's actually, there are millions and millions of people that want to go there, that want to see it. I won't talk to you about what I know about it, but it's very interesting. But Roswell's a very interesting place with a lot of people that would like to know what's going on.
So you're saying you may declassify?
Oh.
You'll take it?
Well, I'll have to think about that one.
So the agenda is very clear. And I should also mention back in 1973, with Jimmy Carter filing a so-called sighting of a UFO, and they're all directed to partake in this this grand deception, and definitely that's where all it's leading. And the New World Order agenda is being pushed with the whole alien angle, the whole UFO deception. Is very clear. And this is in the cards. It's just a matter of time, I believe, before this event happens. To me, it's almost too obvious. But again, the agenda is very clear, very apparent, with all these presidents talking about UFOs, aliens, and all their, basically, all their hired goons, as you can see here, part of this New World Order agenda.